pictures for the holiday card, and this year it was the middle school's turn to submit pictures, and we received a number of them. You might have seen them on the way into the boardroom tonight. We are honoring the student that was selected for their holiday card, and I have it here. It's really rather cute. It was not only popular by the central office staff because it says crabs for the holidays. It was actually a really great picture because it depicted the Eastern Shore, and we just thought it was just great. And the student that created this wonderful masterpiece is Madison Messick. It will be on the 2017 Kent County Public Schools holiday card. We send it out to all of the school districts in the state, and we also send it to all of our business partners locally. So we love the picture, and there's a letter recognizing you for this beautiful piece of work, and we hope that you will continue with, you're very talented, so I hope you continue with that. Congratulations. Fun to do that. I just thought it was really original that depicted something so nice from the Eastern Shore. So everybody has a copy of the card, and so I know Mr. Williams has his setting up there very nicely.
All right.
The next item is the Golden Anchor Award.
Thank you. As you know, that this is a chance every month to recognize some of the great things that are happening in the school system. In particular, the employee or group of employees that exemplify the mission and core values of Kent County Public Schools. What we do is we ask for nominations, and then we have a small committee who looks at those and selects one person or a group of people to receive the award. And this month, we are recognizing April Gagalski, pre-kindergarten teacher at Rock Hall Elementary School. And as April comes up, let me read a little bit here about her. April Gagalski is an extraordinary early childhood educator. She has a passion for teaching that goes well beyond enjoying being with children. She knows the value of play in the classroom, creates a learning environment that is fun and student-centered. It's not unusual to hear laughter coming from her classroom because she has a great sense of humor. She's incredibly patient and respects each child's unique personality and learning style. April's also a district leader in the early childhood curriculum and assessment process. She loves to learn and has participated in the Kent County Math Academy for several years. She's a respected voice in the community and a true team player. Her daily commitment to providing her 4-year-olds with a strong foundation is a true gift to our district. According to her principal, Chris Hemstetter, April is an integral member of our guiding coalition and is greatly respected by our colleagues. As a first-year principal at this school, April has provided me with an understanding of what this community values, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with her. She's a teacher who exemplifies the core values of putting students first and a commitment to the community. And therefore, it's with great pleasure that we recognize April Gagalski, the awardee of the December Golden Anchor Award. And in addition to the award, remember, she will be receiving a certificate for a free house cleaning from Bay Cleaning. So, there you go. This is for you. And come on up and get a picture with Dr. Couch.
I tricked you into coming here. I'm going to pretend I'm tall. also realized that I was remiss in not recognizing Madison's art teacher who's here this evening. So, thanks for being here. Okay, my report. I just have a couple of things to report on. The first of which, just wanted to let the board know that Senator Rose Pep, I guess that's how you say his last name, Rosapep, contacted our district to schedule a visit to Kent County High School on December the 20th. Kent County High School is currently leading the state in dual completers, which means those are the students that also graduate with a high school diploma and a certification from the Career and Technology Education pathway. So at present, the statewide average is 22.8%, and the stats for Kent County High School are 70.3%. So we are incredibly high, and I think that is attributed to the rich CTE program that we have at Kent County High School. The statewide goal for dual completers in 2025 is 45%. So that lets you know just how wonderful our CTE program is at Kent County High School. So just wanted to acknowledge their hard work, and also I know that that has a lot to do with Ms. Williams. She presently just left the high school, and so I want to thank you for your work in that regard as well. Just a quick update on the Kerwin Commission. I attended a statewide superintendent's meeting on Friday, and Senator Pinsky came and provided us with a brief report on the Kerwin Commission. They are really focusing, and the board members, you have a handout on all of the materials that they presented. It's pretty detailed, but I just wanted to let you know that they're focused on 5 policy areas: early childhood education, putting in more resources for at-risk students, high-quality teachers and leaders, college and career readiness pathways, and governance and accountability. And I'm just going to touch on 3 areas that Senator Pinsky spoke to us about. The first is the major goal is redesigning schools that treat teachers as professionals with incentives and supports to continuously improve their practices and performance of their students. So they're specifically talking about teacher compensation, improving teacher compensation, putting in place career ladder systems, and also supports for our new teachers. That would include induction programs and retention, ways to retain our teachers once they're in the profession. Because statewide there is a teacher shortage, and so it's going to be increasingly more difficult to recruit teachers, and so finding ways to retain them or keep them in the profession will be important. The second main area that he spoke about was implementing a system that prepares students for college and careers. Spoke a little bit about early childhood, in particular universal pre-K programs, but then also talking about the need to implement 3-year-old programs in our schools as well. He spent quite a bit of time, which I just spoke about earlier, but he talked about more robust CTE programs, in particular looking at 21st century pathways, looking at ways in which you could implement coding and programming courses in our high school and also in our elementary schools. And I think we're working on that as well through a lot of the work that Dr. Jacob is doing with our technology department. And then looking at dual enrollment, right now our students are allowed to take dual enrollment courses when they're seniors, and they're looking at moving that down into when they're juniors and also when they're sophomores. So allowing students to obtain more college credits so that by the time they graduate, hopefully they will have completed maybe 1 to 2 semesters of their college requirements. At least they'll get that out of the way. And then the third area that he spent some time talking about, which we really did spend a lot of time talking about this particular area, just simply because superintendents were interested in this, was creating leadership development systems that enable school leaders to create and manage high performance schools effectively. So we talked about how come, how can we present a career ladder for administrators and principals, and talking about how come some schools are able to achieve higher results than others, and we spoke about leadership mattering, and how can we attract and groom high-quality teachers to move into administration. So those were important aspects, but I think the main thing that everybody agreed about is all of these sound wonderful and they're great ideas, but where's the money going to come from? So right now they're looking at analyzing the preliminary policy recommendations, because there is quite a bit. You can obtain a lot of that. If you're interested, you can go to the legislative website, and there's a lot of information. They post all of the materials that they talk about at the Kirwan Commission. And right now they're looking at the implementation costs. They anticipate that it's going to be much like the Thornton Act, where there's going to be certain things that are going to be more, have a higher priority than the others. And they're looking at probably a 10-year implementation model. So nothing's going to happen overnight. And basically a lot of the work now is going to come down to money, and how much is it going to cost, and where is the money going to come from. So that completes my report. There's a lot of materials and information, and it actually, you can go onto the website and it has the timeline for most of these recommendations. They've got year 1 through 3, year 4 through 6, and so you can kind of see what they're looking at in terms of long-term implementation.
Dr. Kath,
Yes.
what is APA and NCE?
APA is the company that completed the adequacy funding report, and so that when they say the APA, that's what they're referencing, that adequacy funding report.
What about NCE?
I'm not familiar with that.
NCE gap analysis.
I think they're looking at, I don't even want to elaborate on that because I'm not percent.
Okay. You know, I was thinking when you're talking, back in the 80s, I went to all these education conferences for a job I had, and about teacher professionalism and adequacy. And one of the things that always came up was that teachers shouldn't be spending a lot of time doing lunch duty and bus duty. And I thought this was a done thing back 30 years ago, but we still have teachers spending a lot of time watching kids eat. Is there any other way to do this, to have people who are not, to have teachers teach and have either volunteers or aides doing those things? I mean, this was just such a big deal back in the 80s, and I just was so surprised that it has not really been resolved.
I think that'd be wonderful. I think everybody would stand up and say that's a great idea, but it's going to cost in resources in some way, because we don't have enough IAs that could do the, and I don't know how it is in other districts, but I can tell you in our district there are not enough instructional assistants that would be able to
Do those things?
to do only those things. Otherwise, that's all they would be doing, and many of them are hired to provide direct services to the students. So, it's a hard balance. But certainly there are other states that make a decision that they hire part-time people that come in and do lunch duty. But there's downside to that, because it is a part-time job, and you have a hard time keeping that, the consistency, because you have a high turnover.
I think it's something we should aim for, because I just think that it's not a good use of teachers' time to be watching kids eat or doing bus duty.
Yeah, don't disagree. And I think if you look at the recommendations from the Kirwan Commission, that is one of the things that they talked about, is providing more planning time and more time for teachers to collaborate. But that is going to require dollars, because you're going to have to free up their time to do that, which means you're going to have to hire more individuals that going to be able to create that time within the schedule so that teachers have more time to plan and collaborate. So I think they're all very admirable recommendations, but it's gonna cost, it's gonna come down to what can we afford and how will it be implemented long-term with funding. Because they, you know, initially, these, if you look at the request just from APA, it was gonna cost billions of dollars just to implement the funding formula changes. That doesn't even include these recommendations that are coming from the Kerwin Commission. So, I mean, it's just, it's all fine and well, but what Senator Pinsky said is, I think they're just gonna have to see, these are all pie in the sky right now, but they're gonna have to see what they're really gonna cost. And then, is their stomach within the state, if it means a tax increase, then, you know, how is that gonna play out? And it's an election year, so that's why I think everything got kicked back in terms of just waiting until the elections happen. So there's just a lot of information here. It sounds great, but as I stated, you know, it's a matter of when it's actually gonna happen.
Anybody have anything else?
Okay.
Okay. Personnel actions, Mr. Silver?
During closed session, we reviewed the personnel actions for the month of December, and we bring those to you tonight for your consideration.
Right. I'm looking for a motion to approve the recommended personnel actions.
I move that we approve the recommendations of the administration.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any conversation, discussion? Call for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous, Mr. Knightless. Is this still you, Mr. Silver, or is it back to Dr. Couch? Okay.
So I know we had a couple of attachments and I wanted to make sure we have up there. But essentially, you have before you a memorandum that I have put in the board docs noting that projected FY19, that we need to create a social worker position or positions to provide social and emotional support for our students. Ideally, you know, we could probably have a place to fill a caseload of 2 to 3 social workers. But one of the things that I wanted to speak about is as we project the funding gap as we go into FY19, that, and I think it'd be better if we could put that up there.
I'm working on it.
Okay, all right, thank you. There are a couple of attachments, and the first of which is the document that we reviewed at the last board meeting, which is the expenditures and encumbrances as we forecast moving forward. And I think that it is, see which one would be best to put up there first, just because, yeah, that one. That is the quarterly expenditure report that Ms. Towers discussed at the last board meeting, and that gives us a fairly good forecast in terms of how we anticipate that we're going to end the year. Knowing that we just finished the first quarter, transportation is the big concern at this point because we didn't have enough data to provide an accurate accounting of where we're going to be within that particular line item. But you can see that at the bottom line, we're projecting, just based on the information that we had, we're going to end the year with $130,000, which does not really provide us with a lot of flexibility within the budget itself.
Now, can I ask a question? Is that $130,000 in addition to a $500,000 fund
Right.
balance? Okay.
Well, and we'll get to that.
Okay,
because,
just
yeah,
checking. I
this
mean,
is
I
just,
just,
this
okay.
is just the amount that was allocated to this year's budget.
Okay.
This was, and I think it'll make better sense when we go into the next document, which is a fairly good forecast of where we think we're going to be moving forward. and I think that's where we can demonstrate the $500,000. As you may recall, while we're putting up that particular document, I just wanted to remind the board members that this year's budget actually exceeds the amount of revenue that we're bringing in from state and local sources. So we brought in almost $800,000 in savings or fund balance just to maintain what we have for this year. Which means that's a hole that we're gonna have to fill in FY19. We also brought in $157,000 for transportation, and that helped us make the first lease payments for this year. So in addition to the 800, we brought in another $157,000, which means we're gonna have to support those lease payments in FY19. So as I noted in the memorandum, that next year's budget, we will exceed the amount of money that we have set aside in fund balance. That includes the $500,000 that we set aside for contingency or fund balance that we said, let's keep that in place for emergencies. And as you may recall, maybe you don't, $500,000 is not even, not quite 1 month's worth of payroll. And so if you look at the governmental accounting standards, they actually recommend that governmental entities keep in their reserve at least 2 months of operating costs. So that's, $500,000 it doesn't even cover payroll, it much less does not cover 1 month of operating costs. So, thinking about where we are moving forward to FY19, certainly we have about probably in excess of $397,000 in excess revenue that we can direct towards FY19. Knowing that we're also we've also lost students, so we know we're gonna see a reduction in state and local monies. Or at least we know for sure state. We don't know what's gonna happen locally. But, obviously with maintenance of effort, there would be a decrease in the amount of funding that we would have. I just think, I know we have needs at our schools, but I also know that we have to be mindful and we have to prepare for FY19, because if we spend everything down in this, let's say we were to spend the $397,000, then all we would have is $500,000 that would be directed to fill about $1 million hole. So, I wanted us to have that discussion. My recommendation is that the board approve our ability to hire 1 social worker, at least to finish out this year. And, that certainly does not meet every single need that we have, but it certainly would help us with regard to meeting some of the needs of our students, and be somewhat conservative, because I don't know, what's gonna play out for next year. And the bottom line is, if we can't fill that hole, that means we're gonna have to cut positions. So it's that sustainability in terms of, even with this new position, can I absolutely say with certainty that we're gonna be able to sustain it in FY19? That I don't know.
So, looking for some input from us?
Yes. I mean, if
We don't have a written policy about how much we need for fund balance.
Yeah.
Do you think we should?
Well, certainly we can come up with a policy, but without, ultimately, I think that's, how much weight will it carry with regard to, we can have a policy, but,
It could be helpful in discussions with county government,
Yes.
because the fund balance, my experience has been, the fund balance has been probably the most prickly, most misunderstood issue when we've talked to them. So if we could decide on what we, and I don't know what criteria we would use to decide what that number is, but if we would at least be able to say, okay, this is a policy we have, this is the number.
I don't disagree.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
and if you go back, I mean, you can Google the governmental accounting standards, and it's very clear in the governmental accounting standards that governmental agencies should maintain in their fund balance a minimum of 2 months operating costs.
so that's what I think, there's your formula right there.
Yeah.
Between you and Ms.
So how
Bowers,
much
you should
would
be
that
able to
be?
come up with that number for us.
How much would 2 months operating cost be?
I don't know offhand.
But that's something, I think that's a guideline that we could ask you guys to come up with that number. And I think that would be helpful.
And I think
Maybe you
we
could
can
take
come up-
some of the, maybe misunderstanding or the acrimony that has ended up being in some of that discussion.
Yeah.
And it sort of, I think, props up us up a little bit in any kind of discussion we could have
Yeah.
with them about that.
And perhaps, you know, that instead of, maybe we can define it as a percentage, versus, I mean, we could say a minimum of 2 months of operating costs, and maybe we can actually take it down from there into a percentage.
Do we know if any other school districts, or at least small school districts like us, have a policy regarding that? Could we ask around?
I've got copies
Okay.
of other counties. Caroline County in particular has a very high amount that they keep in their fund balance, but they actually move it towards, they define it in 2 different ways. They define what they keep in their fund balance, and they call it contingency, to provide them with a little flexibility from year to year. But they also have what they call almost a cap, I don't know if they define it as a capital improvement of fund balance, but they actually move it towards saving for, they use it to build, some major, you probably have better knowledge of that than I would, but I looked at their policy, and they actually put it into 2 different accounts, and they defined it in 2 different ways. Carroll County, the same way, Cecil County, a similar way. I don't really know that we have a luxury of coming up with 2 different
No,
accounts.
but I'm just saying, coming up with a number and being able to justify how we came up with it, I think could be one less bone of contention the next time we have a conversation about money with the commissioners. I'm trying to be collaborative and just trying to reduce the issues. And I
Misunderstanding.
I think that could facilitate a conversation. Now, whether they agree with what
Yeah.
we've decided, at least we will be able to say, you know what, we heard what you said, and this is what we're trying to answer that. So maybe that's something we could move forward on, and maybe something is it reasonable to think we could do that in January?
Certainly, I don't think it would be hard to put together a recommendation for a policy. And if, like I said, if we want to just go by the governmental accounting standards, I'd already researched that
Okay.
before. And I actually shared that when we presented our budget to the commissioners last year. But at that point in time, I estimated that was about $1.2 million in order to keep 2 months of operating costs. And I think that's when there was some discussion that we really didn't have the luxury of keeping that amount.
Mhm.
And so that's when that back and forth was had. But again, yeah, it's our policy, but ultimately, the county may not agree with it, I hear that. But anyways, playing into FY19, we know for a fact that we're gonna have the hole to fill in, because we know that we brought in almost $1 million of fund balance just to operate what we have. That means keeping everything as is, keeping all of our teachers, keeping every program, keeping everything as is right now. We know that we've brought in $1 million of savings or fund balance to maintain what we have this year. So moving forward into FY19, we know we're going to have a further reduction because of loss of students. So then you figure that $1 million plus potentially, you know, another $200,000 to $400,000. I mean, we could have a hole as high as $1.4 million. Now, if we direct that $397,000 towards next year, that cuts that down a little bit. But we're gonna have a significant hole that we're gonna have to figure out how to fill. So that is my concern about adding additional positions that, you know, we're going to, not saying that we don't need them. I'm not saying that. We definitely have a need. But I also have a responsibility, and this board has a responsibility for thinking and planning for the budget in FY19. And knowing that we're gonna have that hole to fill, you know, I don't wanna just, you know, have no care about, yeah, well, we got the money, let's spend it. Then when we come back and try to plan for the next year's budget, and then we start saying, well, now we gotta cut $800,000 out of the budget, I don't think people would be very happy if we start having to look at things that are gonna be hurtful to our students.
Well, I'm also mindful of what I thought I heard the commissioners, specifically, I thought it was Mr. Fithian, I heard say in our conversation that, you know, come to them with a specific need that I thought he said that he couldn't remember ever saying no to us. So that's what I heard. Did anybody else hear the same thing? So, you know what, let's, I mean,
Walk
you know, if you can talk the talk, let's see if we can walk the walk. I mean, if we get ourselves in that bind, I think that's the first option. We go and say, hey, you know what, we've heard from parents at a meeting just last month, the need, we're trying to be proactive, we're trying to be creative with our budget, adding one person that's gonna divvy their time up between 3 schools, and we hope next year, not the last one in, it's the first one out, that we're not gonna be in that bind, but I think it's a critical position. I mean, I agree with you, we probably could put a social worker at every school and find a full-time job for them. And I don't think it's, I can't think of the right word, but it's an important position. So if we get in that bind, I think the first thing we should say is, if, you know what you said, come to you with a need, hopefully we won't be in that bind, but, so. I support adding the position, especially since we can fund it this year.
Right.
So, but I'm only one person, I wanna hear what other people have to say.
Right. I just don't, you know, I just wanna make sure everybody is clear about what it means moving forward, and the position that we will be in because of, you know, what potentially we may have to do as far as cutting from the budget.
Yeah, there's a part of me that, I mean, I totally get that, but if we can make it happen this year, I think we should make it happen this year. I don't wanna have to say to a parent, well, we were worried we couldn't pay for it next year, so we didn't give it to you this year. I don't wanna have to say that.
But what I'm saying is, we got an option of hiring 1 or 3.
Right.
One, 2, or 3, and trying to think about where we are in this school year. We've got, you know, by the time we advertise, and we also talked about it with the principals. This is, you know, we're gonna be very selective in the kind of person that we feel can fulfill this role, because it can't just be any social worker. It has to be someone who has some experience with working with students who have great social emotional needs and working with those families. We were lucky enough to find one in one of our elementary schools that just supports the behavior program and the Judy Center and a lot of the needs that we have at Garnett. You know, we were very selective in filling that position. We would like to use the same criteria for selecting someone. And let's see how what that does for helping us with our immediate needs. And then from there we can move forward. But at least it, you know, starts with 1.
What's the salary we're talking?
it depends upon the amount of years that they bring, for experience, but, the one that we hired at, Garnett, I think was a pretty high salary. I mean, it was, upwards of 60, and that's without benefits. So, you know, you gotta add about 20% for benefits. So but, you know, now we're talking about half a year, so, I mean, it won't be a full year's salary, so there'll be some savings, but you have to sustain that moving forward.
So you got one social worker divided between 3 schools. Is there any kind of game plan which you have in mind for dividing one person to 3 schools?
I think that we should assign them, I'm not a fan of traveling from, you know, like trying to travel with 3 schools in one day. So I think we would try to identify, obviously, the middle school has a great population as well, and they have some needs. So I think we would base it, you know, like maybe 2 days at one school, 2 days at another school, and a day at another. We have to just see how it works. But I do think that we would have to make them, at least assign them to a school for the entire day. Otherwise, you're gonna spend more time traveling back and forth.
Because you're Galena, you spend a lot of time in the road,
Yeah.
which would be good.
Dr. Kaplan, I know we're looking at designated 3 schools. Is this position flexible that if a crisis were to occur in one of those schools not designated, that the social worker could go to one of those schools? Because I think King County High is one of them, and Garnett Elementary was one of the 2 schools. They were 2 schools not mentioned here. Garnett has one already, okay.
Yes.
But
And that supports the district, a lot of the district district program that's at Garnett, and also for the Judy Center.
that's what you said, okay. Look, I mean, I'm all in favor of the position also, because I think if you look at any data, you'll see, not just in Kent, but throughout the state, I think you'll see an increase in students with social and emotional needs. And I would go as far as almost calling it an epidemic, because it's just increasing every day. And so it's kind of nice that we're getting out in front of this. I think we are forward thinking, and we are getting out in front of this. I'm in support of this position.
Right. And we'll just have to see, I mean, you know, how it all plays out in terms of how many days at any given school. Like I said, I just know that we have needs at those 3 schools. Now, our PPW pretty much supports the high school. I mean, they provide a lot, and
Yes.
she is a social worker, so she does, you know, provide some assistance. And also, we do have some assistance for all seasons. We have a part-time social worker as well that is paid through, you know, building a caseload. And so there isn't quite enough to build a full-time caseload, but I think right now she's working on that. So I don't know, I think Ms. King has some more information in terms of where we are with that, but, you know, at some point in time, if we can build enough of a caseload, then potentially we could get some support for all seasons.
I know that it'll take a little while to put the advertisement out and to select the person that you think is best suited for our specific situation. Best case scenario, when would you be hopeful that this person could start?
You know, as soon as the board approves it, we'll get, you know, we already have the advertisement ready. We can post it on the website, and I think the principals need to be involved in selecting the person that they feel could best meet their needs. If we're lucky, maybe we could have somebody employed in January.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, February.
So we're looking for a motion to
Yes.
approve the personnel request, to approve a 1.0 social worker who would be shared between Rock Hall Elementary, Galena Elementary, and Kent County Middle School.
I move that we approve this request.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other questions or discussion before we vote? I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous, Ms. Yanakis. All righty.
Okay, the next item is in reference to the letter that I sent home to the families that we would be reviewing our bullying, harassment, and intimidation policy. So you have before you the first review of some policy changes that we are recommending. We've added a number of definitions about biased behavior, racial, religious, sexual orientation, and also disability, ethnicity. So we've added quite a bit of information about cyberbullying. We also looked at some recommendations and some updates that were provided to us by MSDE. We also defined hate crimes, hazing, and all of those references to the policy. We tried something different this year, this year. This year. We worked on it collaboratively with the Central Office Administrative Team, and we all were adding some changes to the policy that we felt added clarifying statements, and also made it very clear about reporting, prevention, and interventions and remediation. So there's quite a extensive amount of changes that are in there. But this is just for your first review, and so I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have in regards to this policy.
Well, I'm guessing, looking at it, that all the things in blue are the changes of the new things.
Yes.
So, I'm reading, or thought I read that I guess the policy was first formulated in 2005. I'm just wondering, has it had an upgrade since then? When was
Last year.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It was 2016, so it might have been a couple of
Okay.
years.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
okay. I honestly haven't read it yet, so I don't know enough to ask you any questions. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to ask.
This will come to us twice, 2 more times, correct? One more
time.
One more time, okay.
In January, we'll be expecting a vote?
Yes.
All right, okay. Okay. Ms. Unitas, did anyone sign up for public participation?
I have one. Is there anybody else?
Actually, no.
You can sign up. If you want to fill out one of the cards in the back, we'll start with this one.
Okay, thank you. Gretchen Straw?
Hi. I would like to comment upon the apparent racial problems going on in our middle and high school. During the first quarter, both schools suffered from incidents. I personally am aware of suspensions that occurred, and many families were affected, including mine. I do not understand the whys of the problems occurring here. From pre-K through high school, I always went to multicultural schools and never experienced anything like what has occurred during the first quarter of this year. I've heard of parents wanting to pull their kids out of school because of racial tensions, but I'm personally not willing to give up on our public school system so easily. While there are policies in place already, I would like to suggest that the school needs to go beyond having a policy against discrimination and profiling. What I would suggest is that the schools need to institute an educational system against discrimination starting in pre-K. Instead of having a one-day workshop on bullying, we need to have it integrated into the daily lives of our children. I do not believe our school system is prepared to do this internally. I think it is a program that would require outsourcing, perhaps visiting other schools to see how they have successfully dealt with it. The other thing that is lacking in our school system is authority figures who are African American and Hispanic. Currently at the high school, the administration is comprised of white males. A few months ago, Trish McGee stated that we need to hire teachers who had grown up in Kent County and would stay here and not use it as a stepping stone job. I think that the Board of Education needs to go another step and actively recruit for teachers at job fairs at colleges and universities from a more diverse pool of applicants. It makes me incredibly sad that in pre-K, children were just friends with each other, no matter how they looked, and over the years walls were constructed, hateful words and thoughts were built, and now we have the same problems that were fought over in the 60s and 70s, over race and differences. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that what we have now isn't working. Perhaps a small group of parents, teachers, administration, and community leaders would be able to collaborate and come up with a start to healing this problem. I don't think sitting the whole school down for a lecture is a solution. The solution will come from individuals talking to each other, not being lectured to. Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving forward on this.
Yeah. So typically we don't comment, but I feel like it would be helpful to make a few comments about this. Janice Steffi and Wendy Keene are working on a grant to implement a multicultural program, and we're hoping that we'll be able to obtain some funding for that. You're right, again, it's all sometimes comes down to money. But it's greater than that as well. We agree. We have to think about what kinds of programs that we can implement at the elementary level. I'm 100% in agreement with you that it starts early in pre-K, and we have to find a way to integrate that into our everyday practice. And so we're working towards that. We are also working with the Social Action Committee to identify ways in which the community can be part of the change, if you will, and noting, I just know what one of the members of that committee stated, it's not just a school problem, it's a community problem. And so I think it's going to take all of us working together in order to address these issues in our schools. So I think we are moving towards a positive resolution, and I hope to announce some other strategies and activities that we plan to put in place to address it. So I really do thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Mara Worth?
Hello. So I don't have anything planned. I wasn't planning on talking, but as I sit here and listen, thank you for supporting the need for a social worker. I kind of started that a little. But to say that you can share a social worker between 3 schools, I really don't see how that's possible. When I came to you the first time and you told me that Garnett social worker could not be shared with Rock Hall Elementary because her caseload is so large. So I don't see how you're going to get one social worker for over 800 students. I just don't see how that's going to work, and I really wish that maybe we could just write a request to the county commissioners, since we've all heard them say that, it's on video, that they will, give you the money. So I don't know, we should probably hire one for Rock Hall Elementary and for the middle school. You also told me that you have a social worker that's on medical leave, but you don't know when they will be returning.
After winter break.
So could we hire a social worker for the Rock Hall Elementary and for the middle school, and then whenever that social worker on medical leave comes back, they could take over Galena?
The social worker is our PPW, and so they,
Explain what
that's a pupil personnel worker. They address a lot of the, I don't know, I probably am not going to communicate it the best way, but they address a lot of the attendance issues and a lot of social issues that we have to address with the families.
Mm-hmm.
And so that person really is shared amongst all schools. She doesn't necessarily just provide services to one school in particular. So the same thing with the social worker that's providing us with some support for all seasons. She works at a number of the schools. So I disagree with you somewhat that it's impossible to share.
Well, the For All Seasons, it's easier for them to share because they have to have parents' consent to talk to the students.
Right.
So they're not exactly there for all the students. That's just if their parents say, you're allowed to talk to my kid.
Well, I mean, it would be students that need, need some additional assistance as identified from the
the school principal. So it's not going to be to provide assistance for every single student at each school anyways, because not all of them are going to qualify for that type of assistance. So I just think, like, I don't want to come back in a few months and say, hey, we're still having this problem because we're sharing one social worker with 3 schools. Not just 3 schools next to each other, 3 schools all around the county, and I just really think that's gonna be hard, and I mean, everybody has heard the commissioners say that they'll give you the money, so let's ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Reports, Kent County Teachers Association?
Good evening, President McGee, Dr. Couch, members of the board. Happy December. I don't know, I would invite everyone to come to school because no time like December for a classroom teacher, especially a December that goes all the way to December 22nd. So I think for this month, mostly it's that the teachers are plugging along, singing concert songs at the elementary level, and trying to make the best of it until December 22nd, and then moving on into the new year. So happy holidays to everyone. Hope you have a nice time with your families.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kent County Education Support Personnel Association? Kent County Administrators and Supervisors Association? Kent County Commissioners? Board discussion. And we'll start with you.
Okay, so at the start of this month, around the 10th, new Interact members were inducted. And Interact is basically a club that helps get more involved in our community. And this week, our high school is being involved in a canned food drive in hopes of collecting as many canned foods as we can. This was organized by Honor Society. Honor Society is also holding a blood drive, which is this Thursday, and students who are willing and able to donate blood will do so. And Honor Society will be having their induction ceremony this Friday. And this Wednesday, there is a seasonal sensation dinner at the high school where culinary students prepare meals while the audience listens to ensembles of music from the band and chorus. And the band is finishing up their yearly Christmas CD and heading on to winter tour where they perform for different schools around the county.
Dr. Costa?
I went to the Galena Elementary School winter concert, which was packed at the high school. Barely got a seat, and it was very charming. It was nice.
Mr. Reed?
Just a couple questions. Dr. Couch, when does our next calendar review come up for our next school year, or do we do a 2-year calendar? I can't remember, I can't recall.
We had done a 2-year calendar. Remember, we had to do the revisions
We did,
last year,
right.
so we haven't done a second year.
When that come out? What month does that usually occur?
Last year was early. It usually takes place in February.
That's what I thought, okay.
End of January, February, and we'll bring it to March meeting and then for approval in April.
Has anybody heard whether or not there was in fact any economic growth by having schools start post-Labor Day? Don't mean to put you on the spot, I keep trying to research it and look for myself when it comes up to the next calendar, because
We actually asked that question at our meeting, and they said they were gathering the data.
And the reason I bring that up is because Baltimore and some of the larger school districts with a lot of different ethnicities are struggling to create this new calendar because they're trying to honor religious holidays. So I knew this would come up eventually somewhere along the line, but I was kind of curious and was waiting to see the data. And I just have searched and searched, and I have yet to find any data, so I just want to kind of keep searching before we have that calendar come up. Other than that, Merry Christmas, everybody, because we will not see you again until January.
Mr. Williams?
I'm looking forward to the Honor Society induction this coming week at the high school. Next to graduation, I think it's probably the most exciting thing to see, because you get to to see the students that actually are the high flyers and the ones that go to school to learn. You know, we sit here for the last several months talking about consolidation, buses, all the negativity. But if you want to see something positive, go to the Honor Society induction and see the kids that are actually there to learn and the kids that are going to be the future of our county. Another thing, I guess is Wednesday night is the season sensation dinner, and I always look forward to that. Culinary students cook the meal, the band students provide entertainment, and it's always a nice evening, and it's always a nice turnout with the community. So if anybody wants to show up, I'm sure they'll take. I'm not putting it out there.
I think they said they still had just a few more tickets left.
Okay.
But I don't
It's always
quote me on that.
it's always a good turnout. It's always a fun evening. So, like Mr. Reed said, we'll see you next year, and I hope everybody has a happy holiday.
I want to talk about, we need to schedule an evaluation for Dr. Couch. Dr. Couch's contract calls for an evaluation twice a year, and I've fallen down on the job for the second half of 2017, got behind some other really passionate issues, and before I knew it, we were in October, and we'd missed our window of opportunity. So a couple of things we need to do. We, as a board, I think it would be advantageous if we set it in stone that said when we're going to do the superintendent's evaluation, you know, and we can approve that on next month when Mr. Getz is here. You know, common sense says January and July sound like good, but we can agree on that next month or disagree on that next month. The plan is, a couple of years ago, the board developed an instrument, and it's got, I'll say 10 questions that allows every board member to, A, grade the superintendent on a scale of 1 to 5 and to write down their comments. So the way we have handled it in the past, and I talked to each of the board members not once but twice over the last week, the consensus was, we were unanimous at the end, that was the way we would do it. Each one of us would fill out the evaluation ourselves. I am going to request them to have them before this Christmas, which will give me a little time to review, synthesize, average out the numbers, and then we will schedule a special meeting to go over that with Dr. Couch. It will be behind closed doors for special board meeting. We will meet in public and then adjourn to go behind closed doors. I will make sure that Dr. Couch has what we're all going to have ahead of plenty of time so that she can review and she can respond in any way that she would like. So I'm thinking that when our January meeting is what, the 8th? I'm thinking at the 8th, when Mr. Getz is here, we can all look at our schedules. He has to travel a lot before his job, that we will, at that January 8th meeting, schedule our special meeting to go over Dr. Couch's evaluation. Do we need any sort of motion for that, or just want to make sure publicly that everybody, we're all seem to be on the same page? And I had shared that information with Dr. Couch, and she seemed agreeable to that also.
Yeah, just whenever we set a date, just let us know and we'll advertise
Well,
it.
we'll vote on it at the January 8th
Right.
meeting.
That's the only thing
Okay.
that we need to do.
Yeah, I didn't know if we have any other scheduled meetings in January. Will the public hearing on the facilities plan be held in January?
Yes, I believe that's January the 11th.
Okay, so that's something also that we will need to navigate around. But I didn't see us meeting that week anyhow, after we'd already met on Monday. But, so at the January 8th meeting, we will schedule the special meeting to conduct our evaluation with Dr. Couch. Alrighty, that is all for board discussion. Education services.
Early childhood success data.
Well, while they're starting this, I'll go ahead and start my presentation. Okay, well, I'll just talk. Okay. So good evening, President McGee, board members, Dr. Couch. I am very excited today to talk about the early success data that we have had in our birth to K model through special education. So the first area that I'm going to talk about is our cost data. So the Child Outcome Summary, also known as COSS, is the process that we use to measure our infants and toddlers and our pre-K students who are receiving services and early intervention services and special education services in 3 areas that we're going to discuss using a 7-point scale. I gave you a copy of the 7-point scale so that you could see what we are measuring our students on and their children. So a lot of people ask us why we use the cost data. We really use the cost data because it helps us be able to compare our children, not only to children here in Kane County, but across the state and across the nation. Okay, so there it is. So not only can we compare our children, but we can gather this data and then we can make really data-informed decisions on where we need to instruct our children and where we need to make sure that we're providing the extra guidance that they need. So when we present our data to you, 28 children last year were referred to the Infants and Toddlers program. So Kane County Public Schools has put a lot of effort into this early intervention program to really start targeting children before they enter school to make sure that they're at that level where we need them to be successful in school. So 28 children were referred to the Infants and Toddlers program. 22 children were evaluated, and it's 18 instead of 19 of these children qualified for the Infants and Toddlers program. So this equated to 81.8% of the children evaluated were found to be eligible for the Infants and Toddlers program, and I think that's important to note that we are not just assessing children who do not qualify, but we are really targeting those children that will meet the criteria for our program. So the IFSP, as we've discussed before, is the Individualized Family Service Plan. This Individualized Family Service Plan really addresses those outcomes with the family as the center of the implementation. So when we determine what children qualify for the IFSP, we also look at our extended IFSP, so children who qualify for special education services at the age of 3 could be found eligible for an extended IFSP. The difference between an IEP and an extended IFSP is that although we're addressing both the academic and educational concerns, the IFSP is a year-round service versus the IEP, which is school-based calendar services.
Can I ask a question? Would a child in pre-K, do they get an IEP, or does that happen when they're a little older?
So when they are in pre-K, they get an IEP.
They do? Okay, wow.
We can start IEPs at the age of 3. We try to get them before the age of 3 into our Infants and Toddlers program. So you have to be under 2 years, 9 months to be able to receive that IFSP, and then we could do the extended IFSP. So our families like the IFSP version a lot better than the IEP version because it's really family-centered. Mm-hmm. And you're addressing all of those skills in that natural environment and working with the family to also work with their child.
So these are all done in the families, not at a school?
No, they're done in the family, in the natural environment. So at the age of 3, we also look, natural environment is community-based. We'll go to the library and work with families. We work with our families to get them into circle time at the library and story time, so that way they're learning those pre-skills before getting into pre-K of being able to sit and interact with their peers.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the extended IFSP option is really moving Maryland towards that mission of creating that seamless birth to K model that's addressing all of the skills of the child in all domains of the child. So we are looking at our pre-K cost data in social relations. So this is really where we are discussing those positive social emotional skills that those our children have and our students have. So when we look at our pre-K cost data, we're looking at how it relates to family members, how those students relate and interact with other adults, communicate, regulate emotions and feelings, and engage others in those social interactions and play. adapting to changes in our routines and settings, and understanding and following social rules. So it's really all of those, you can see that our IEP is really measuring and addressing those deficits in the area and giving children that equity and helping our children to have the access to the general education curriculum in their least restrictive environment. So in social relations, I wanted to point out the last 3 years worth of data that we have collected. So as you can see, our data has increased every year.
What are the different colors? I don't understand.
Oh, they're
I don't
different
know
years.
what
2000.
it's just they're different years. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, it's just the program.
I got you.
Made
Okay.
it a different color than.
Okay.
So in 2014, you can see that we didn't have very many children who were exiting our program with substantial growth. This year we had 100% of our children in pre-K with ratings from parents, teachers, service providers exiting our program with substantial growth. And of these children that exited with substantial growth, almost 56% of these students exited in this area functioning within their age expectations in this outcome. And I think that speaks a lot to our teachers.
I was going to say, what do you attribute the success and the big jump in just a matter of 2 years to? The staff?
The staff, we have done a lot of training, which I'm going to talk about, but we have focused a lot on our social emotional development, and we've also focused a lot on age-appropriate skills.
Okay.
And working collaboratively not only with our special education teachers, but really making it a joint effort with our general education and special education teachers, and also including our instructional assistants, because we know that they're playing the major role also in with our classrooms. So our next area was the knowledge and skills, and this is really those building blocks that help establish where children are later in their education career. So when we are making growth in these areas, we're really helping to narrow that gap. And as you can see, again, 100% of the students in pre-K exited with substantial growth. That means that they had to jump more than one category on that 7-point scale. They had to go up 2 or more. And 56% of these students were also functioning within age expectations and in this outcome by the time they exited pre-K. So we really looked at those early learning skills of interacting with those books, the pictures, the print in those books, problem solving, new situations, and really understanding and responding to the directions that were being given to them. So then use of appropriate behaviors to meet needs. So this is another really major area that we are focusing on, because we want our children to be able to get along with their peers and be able to communicate their wants and needs and contribute to their own health and safety. So this is really how well are they responding to those delays when they're told you have to wait or no, or they want something, you know, rather than using inappropriate behaviors, are they using those appropriate behaviors? And again, this is, according to our pre-K cost data, this really showed our largest growth in this area with almost 67% of the children who exited. Of the 100% children that made substantial growth were functioning within age expectations. So we also looked at our KRA data. Our KRA data, kindergarten is really the start of that formal education career for all of our children, and the KRA is given in the beginning of the year to measure the readiness skills to ensure that children are prepared for today's kindergarten curriculum. So this assessment is given to all students in Kent County Public Schools, including those with their most significant cognitive challenges. And so when we looked at this, sorry, we compared in 2015 where our point gap was compared to 2016. So we did have the gap did widen in this domain in literacy and language. And it's important to remember that this is just one of the data points of comparing children's literacy and language skills, because when you look at the pre-K cost data of what was just taken of them in June the previous year, school year, the exit data did show that 100% of those children did make progress, substantial growth. So how are we addressing this gap? We're addressing this through our early intervention programs and special education preschool IEPs to narrow this gap using data to drive our instruction and to help us really make those informed decisions. So new early childhood interventions to address language and literacy are being piloted by our special education teachers right now to ensure that we meet the needs of all of our students. And we're also working collaboratively with our general education partners to ensure that the needs of the students are being met through that general education curriculum, and that they are also provided with the same professional development opportunities that our special education teachers are receiving. So when we provide a training to our special education teachers in an intervention, we're also now including our general education teachers. So when you look at mathematics, the KRA data showed that Kane County Public Schools is closing the gap between those non-disabled and disabled peers in kindergarten by 8 points. So here we have really focused on those number sense activities and activities that came from the preschool inclusion toolbox that allow us to address math skills and to enhance the learning of all of our students. So we're not really taking our programs and just using them for only special ed programs, but we're also saying, okay, this child is struggling over here, may not be identified as a special ed child, but because of our inclusive model, we're able to work with those students as well. When we look at the physical development and well-being, we were again able to narrow that gap between non-disabled kindergartens and disabled kindergartens in physical development and well-being by 10 points. So what we have learned is that physical development and well-being is essential to the learning of all of our students. So to help continue narrowing the gap for next year, we have invested in using the Special Olympics curriculum for pre-K motor skills, which includes gross motor screeners and activities to help all our students with their gross motor skills. So all pre-K, special education teachers, PE teachers, and therapists were trained to use this curriculum last May to help improve the development of the motor skills of our pre-K students. These kits and trainings were free to Kent County Public Schools through a study being conducted by MSDE and a grant opportunity that we received. So this is where we are extremely excited. We dramatically closed the gap in social foundations. And we're continuing to close this gap. We narrowed this gap by 21 points. So how did we do this? So last year we had a team of general and special education early childhood teachers and preschool inclusion team members meet regularly throughout the year to address social emotional learning strategies for our children who have experienced trauma or have challenging behaviors in pre-K. So participation in this group was voluntary as the teachers met after school to analyze data, implement strategies based upon the Division of Early Childhood of the Council of Exceptional Children's recommended practices to address learning, families, and the environment where we teach these students. So we took these practices not only for pre-K, but we also had our early intervention teams there to work with our infants and toddlers families as well using this model. And we also addressed the early childhood education disparity of minority children and best practices for addressing challenges within the early childhood setting and the use of several strategies to build relationships with our most challenging children. Schools that participated last year were Galena, Rock Hall Elementary School, and Garnett Elementary. And this study was funded through the Early Childhood Connections grant that Kent County Public Schools received. So with this data, we know that we still have a ways to go, but where is this data taking us and where are we going now? So teachers, we continuously survey teachers, and teachers feel that they have received training in addressing the social and emotional deficits. However, they still feel they need more strategies and skills to be able to do this. So we have written another grant, the Early Childhood Implementation Plan, to continue our work to build the teacher capacity to address these challenging behaviors and the provisions of specialized instruction and related services to children with disabilities in regular early childhood programs. So our overarching goal is really that our general education teachers, special education teachers, instructional assistants will be able to utilize all of these practices that they are learning to address not only the areas of assessment, but their environment, the family, instruction, interaction, team and collaboration, and transition with fidelity. So our plan, we have a plan to sustain and improve our growth. So of course, anytime we write a grant, they always want to know how are you going to continue this. So we have really worked hard with our team members to show that to MSDE that we wanted to continue and sustain this improvement in our growth. And I'm not going to read all of these to you, but we also just have learned about the new Southfield trauma modules that just got approved. And we are getting training in that as well to address our challenging behaviors in pre-K and K. So this is, Southfield is the social emotional foundations for early learning. So it really addresses that social emotional learning in our young ones. So our children are not the only children. This is a nationwide problem where challenging behaviors are escalating amongst our youngest population. So we really wanted to stay ahead of this, and we have written to another grant, and that's the Early Childhood Implementation Plan that I keep referring to, for $60,000 that we, if MSD has said that, you know, with our improved efforts that they may be able to sustain for 2 to 3 more years. So with this, we really are going to focus on building that capacity in our teachers, not just giving them the strategies, but helping them build this capacity to be able to address child number 3 for year number 3 when they come along, so that this is not just a one-time, here you go, it's over with. So we want to use coaching, we want to use, we have contracted with some experts in the areas of some of our most difficult challenges to be able to help our teachers so that outside voice can come in and also give that additional layer of support to our teachers and our families. So we're also we have 3 trainers who just finished and were recognized earlier this summer for receiving their training and being reflective coaches. So they're going to also work with the families to help build capacity in our families to help address some of these social and emotional issues we are experiencing. So, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
And I don't know if this meets the definition of sustainability or whatever. I was wondering, way back in one of the early slides, there was I'll say 66% of the students were age appropriateness when they transitioned out of the program. Is there any sort of data that, I don't want you to go over it tonight, but I don't know, do we keep track of, you know, these children? Let's say we get them through pre-K and, you know, because of all these wonderful things we're doing for them, we have them age appropriate. Do we follow them through the school system to find out if at some point they slip back, or do they continue to at least maintain or continue?
Yes. Do we do that?
Some of our children who had the age expectations may not have been dismissed from special education services.
Right, okay.
Some could have been, but most of them are not. So we also look at their KRA data. We also keep track of them with the follow-up from our early interventionists. Our early interventionists, since we are small, have really played a huge role in making that connection from our early intervention program to our school population. So they're actually providing a lot of additional coaching. They're going in and they're working up to 3rd grade with these students to really start focusing on, okay, so they're slipping, let's get them back to where
That's what I wanted. Well, that is one of the, it doesn't seem to be too many advantages of being so small, but that's one of them that
It is
nobody,
a strong,
fingers crossed, no one's falling through the cracks.
yes, it is a strong advantage of being small that we are. Because we not only know that, we know the kids by their names, we know
Right.
their parents, and we can pick them out year after year.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So I'm really proud of our teachers for the dedication that they gave, and I'm really excited to see this data, and I can only hope for next year's data to be just as great.
Thank you.
Which 3 of the training?
I'm sorry?
Which 3 of the training?
Diana Leclerc, Beth Wright, and Danielle Coudeau. And they came out as trainers of the program. And it took 2 years to finish that, and lots of tears and sweat and blood from them. Videoing and really doing a lot of coaching amongst our PLC teams.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next presentation is the next generation scholars.
Hey, President McGee, board members, Dr. Couch, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Next Generation Scholars program that we have the opportunity to be a part of. Here, let me show you. Yes. I tried. Okay, I got you. Thank you. So we're going to partner with the Maryland Business Roundtable. This is not a new organization. You've probably heard this name before. And they basically, they've been charged over the years with working with school systems across the state of Maryland, most recently updating their mission to college career readiness and helping to provide resources for teachers and schools to make individual plans. And that'll make sense in a minute. So, like I said, Maryland Business Roundtable, is not new to us. We've been working with them since 2011. At that point in time, they were basically had a speakers bureau. And so what they would do, at least at the high school level, was they would come to us and they would bring speakers from across the state of Maryland and talk to kids about how their schooling is important and how it helps to get them to the college options that they want and the career options. So just for example, we would have speakers from Social Security Administration, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Citigroup, AHEC, Eastern Shore Health Education. So there's just a name of a couple of organizations that would come and speak with our kids. By 2013-14, they had really moved their focus to STEM innovation schools. Again, we worked with them to help strengthen our own STEM program in terms of the ability to sort of share resources across the state or have access to resources because we are such a small area in Kent County, and the kids do have some opportunities across the state. And again, with this, the Speakers Bureau still stayed alive. But why STEM? STEM basically because when they were looking at the data from the U.S. Department of Commerce over the past 10 years, the STEM-related fields and jobs in those areas were growing 3 times more than any other area, and that's why they focused on STEM at that point. So that brings us to their current initiative. Again, still sticking with a lot of what they've been doing, but now really reaching out and working individually with school systems and individual schools within some of the districts with populations that have high free and reduced meal students and first generation college goers. So that's why, I'm terrible about this, that's why Kent. So they've partnered currently with 5 counties. Dorchester and Kent are the ones coming on after winter break, so January, February. But you can see those are the free and reduced meals numbers for these particular 5 counties, and you can see how that we fit into that population. So, Mr. Reed, I'm not exactly sure which Caroline schools. I believe they're working with 2 or 3. Okay. So maybe you may have some comments for us. I don't know how long they've been working with Caroline. Very recent?
Yeah, I'm not very familiar, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I'm not part of schools.
Right, I think this is fairly recent.
This is the first year for the
Okay,
program.
so they may already have an MOU, but maybe haven't done a lot of work yet. I'm just not sure.
Sorry,
So, yeah, I thought maybe you'd have some insight for us.
I'm so excited already.
But you can see in terms of Kent's free and reduced meals number, 57%. But also what's very interesting is that the class of 2017, 67% of that class were first generation college goers. So, so that fits in nicely with the initiative that they have for us and that we have for ourselves. So just in terms of taking a look at what they'll be doing with our students. So this year, the hope is for us to get up and running by February. They would be working with grades 7, 8, and 9 to start, and then each year they would expand. So next year, 7, 8, 9, 10, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's how it seems to be spread out in terms of their timeline. So you can see with grades 7 and 8, they're also using the Naviance tool. Now Naviance, you probably know all about Naviance because that's how you're applying for your college applications, your scholarships. So that's an app that our schools use in middle school and high school, and as well the one that they recommend from Maryland Business Roundtable. So when they're young in grades 7 and 8, we're really using that, and they've already started because our counselors also know how to use the Naviance program with kids. So they've already started in the middle school working with some career interest tools with the students. So you can see, I'm not going to read through that, but you can see some of the activities that they have for grades 7 and 8. I will say, too, that a plan for high school, our 8th graders come to us with a 6-year plan. So basically, that's saying, what do you want your 4 years of high school to look like plus 2 after that? So we try to get our kids to start thinking beyond high school. So again, that will not be lost by the wayside. And the other thing that you're going to notice on these next couple of slides are the summer bridge programs as appropriate, and what I wanted to mention was just a few of those that we offer students. So typically through newsletters or information home or through the school app, we give students and parents information about summer programs like, let me just give you a couple that we've talked to our students about over the last years: Hobie, Young Terps, Diverse Minds, GIS workshops, space apps, women's in computer science, natural resources camp, Maryland summer centers, Maryland leadership workshops, Maryland Conservation Council. So those are just a few opportunities, but what we find is unless somebody is specifically working with these families and these students to get themselves registered for these kinds of opportunities, a lot of times they don't have it. So this will be nice to have that extra set of hands. You can see, I skipped grade 9. Yep. Okay, so you can see grade 9 just kind of really takes it just a step further. Again, you can see revisiting the high school plan, the summer bridge, that's all there. Beginning to investigate that college career pathway part. And again, participating more in those learning experiences like job shadowing and those types of things. By grade 10 and 11, especially by 11, that is really where, and I'm sure you'll be able to speak to this, by 11, if you're college bound, you are working, you are doing those college visits, you are practicing those admissions interviews, especially our CTE kids, that is part of their program. They have to do an informal interview with an industry person. You're preparing for those SATs, those college applications, you're revisiting that graduation plan, and again, those summer bridge programs. So these years are, you have to do these years. It's not about working and planning, it's you're actually doing to get to the options that you want. And by grade 12, again, you're using that Naviance, you're applying to colleges, scholarships, financial aid. The one piece I like, currently last year we had about 22 kids out on internships. I'd love to see that increase. And again, a transition plan, that's instead of saying high school plan, we're saying transition plan at that point because you're grade 12. So you guys, you know that by grade 12, I mean, we're pushing that every student, 100% of our students have a plan. What will you be doing? I think a lot of these things, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Tracy, that's all great, fine, and dandy. That sounds a lot like what your college counselor or your guidance counselors are doing. It is. Our counselors are doing a lot of this work. Again, the extra hands and help and resources that could be brought from this, I think, is critical because, again, I'm going to say it one more time. We find, especially with our high school seniors, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, if we are not holding their hands specifically through that entire process, sometimes it does not happen. And I can speak just for, as many of us probably in the room can, we've had a child that's been a senior. That senior year, and I'm an educator, that is a tough year. That is a stressful year for the parent and for the child to make sure that all goes off successfully. So that extra set of hands, I am really excited for.
So would you share with the board how much money that this grant will provide to us and what that money is going to specifically be dedicated towards?
It's $200,000, and Gina, help me on this, is that per year or over the course of a few years? I do know that the person that we would be hiring would be up to 28 hours a week and $34 an hour. There are some educational requirements with that job responsibility, but I'm not sure, Gina, is it 200,000 each year? Okay.
My understanding.
Well, Maryland Business Roundtable actually is coming to us. So I think it's a matter of us doing an MOU, correct, Dr. Couch?
Right. We met the initial qualifications for the grant, so there were 5 districts within the state that met the high farms population and the statistics for first year college goers. And so this money, my understanding is it's $200,000 for the year. We have to seek funding every year. Delegate McIntosh is the one who sponsored the bill, which brought the funding for this program. And so we would have to continue to seek additional funding. But this money would help us to hire the counselor, which would be geared towards just this counseling, which is what we need. And then it would provide us with additional resources for college visits, all of these things that we talked about, preparation for ACT, SAT, and then meeting with the parents to provide them with help in terms of completing the applications and all of those things. So it's really exciting because this provides us with that additional resource that we need and the monies that we need.
It's going to be important to get it every year if we're starting with 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. You don't want to lose them after the 9th grade.
Exactly.
So.
And Business Roundtable seemed to think that it was a important focus, and of course outcomes. We're going to have to demonstrate some positive outcomes, which could help support the continuation of the grant. But most assuredly, if we have the grant year 1, and then they get additional funding, we're not going to be dropped from the grant. I mean, they might expand to other districts, but my understanding is we would continue as long as that money is allocated by the Assembly. So we're very excited about this.
Yeah, I think it's great. I understand the importance of having goals, but one of the things I noticed with the kids last year with the Future Aspirations Night is some of them had such narrow goals that, and some of those jobs are going to be done by robots by the time they get out of college. I wanted to hear, but I didn't hear from a single student that they just wanted a good college education, that they wanted to be open-minded about, what they were going to study, and they weren't going, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be this. They were so narrowly focused. Does that concern you at all? It just seems to me that, just getting a good college education should be an important goal. I mean, not everybody is so vocationally focused when they're 17 years old. I know with my own kids, they ended up doing things very different from what I would have predicted or they would have predicted when they were 17.
So I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, just that I would like to see us graduate people who are really curious and want to know a lot about all kinds of things and are not terribly vocationally kind of limited or making very, I can't remember some of the things they said they were going to do, but I think for a lot of people, getting a good college education is just such a wonderful thing, one of the most important things in their lives, and it doesn't necessarily lead to a specific job. They're going to be doing jobs that don't even exist now. We can't even imagine them. And one of the things that they need to be is flexible and have a lot of interests.
some of the kids are undecided when they go in, but it's very interesting. When you are applying for a lot of those scholarships, they are really forcing some of that narrow-mindedness in terms of, you know, you're eligible for this scholarship if you want to be in the field of.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, right now, I'm very excited that we have kids that are thinking beyond 12th grade.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You know, thinking in terms of, you know, what am I going to do when I leave these four walls? Because that's not always been my experience. And so I hear what you're saying, I hear you, and I wonder if sometimes when we are making those post-graduation plans, we are sort of too forcing them to, you know, well, what do you like? What do you think you're interested in? What do you know, so we may be fostering some of that, but I do think once kids get into college, a lot of times they figure that out, that, oh, well, maybe I do like something different, or maybe I'm going to use my college degree. I got my degree in this, but I'm actually going to go to work to do something else.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes those things happen naturally on their own, but it could be because that we're pushing them to pick a direction.
Yeah.
So,
And I think
but I
get
hear
them
you.
there. We just need to get them there too.
Get them there and keep them
there.
if that's what they want.
Well, it's great. I think
So-
it's exciting. Thank you.
Next, Python Software Foundation grant.
I didn't have a presentation, you want a presentation?
No, you could just talk about it.
Sure, so this is just a small grant from the Python Software Foundation. Now, we're not bringing snakes to the schools. Python is an open source programming language. It's used in industry. And so what we want to do is we want to get our students started with Python. They can start as early as around grade 3. So we would like to start them on scratch and get them rated to Python. And they're going to learn a programming language that will enable them to utilize it in industry. So it's a small grant that will provide us some funding for some equipment. And we're going to start off with a hackathon, and they're going to hack away at the equipment and learn while they're doing it.
Ethical hacking.
Ethical hacking.
Ethical hacking.
I should have just stayed over here. Again, this is a new policy procedure for Kent County Public Schools, so I'm just going to briefly highlight the big pieces here. The one thing I want to say before I even start to go into this service animal is that service animals and therapy dogs are different things. That's one of the big things I began to find out when we did some of this research. So we are not going to be talking about therapy dogs tonight. That may be in your future. That might be in your future, right? So I'm just going to give you really the definition of a service animal. So basically, service animals are individually trained to do a work or specific task that would benefit an individual with disability. So those disabilities could include physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or some other mental disability. But the task that animal is to perform must be directly tied to the student's disability. So that's your basic definition of a service animal. In terms of access, public access, the service animal would be able to go on campus where students and employees go on campus. In terms of the requirements, the animal must be under control of the handler. The animal must have a leash or some kind of tether unless that leash or tether interferes with the specific disability of that child. Kent County Public Schools is not responsible for the care, supervision of that service animal. It is the sole responsibility of the handler in terms of feeding, exercising, and cleanup. So making arrangements for a service animal, basically there would have to be some collaboration with the school principal and central office staff here to make sure that the arrangements are made so that it can be successful. But some of the things that would need to be considered would be a rest time or place for the animal, appropriate times and areas for the animal to relieve itself, you know, emergency procedure clarifications, and the child still would receive transportation services should they need that. So in terms of, again, liability, liability is on the owner of the animal. There are some removal or exclusion processes. So basically, in order to remove the service animal, we would need to demonstrate that it is out of control, it is not housebroken, right? That basically the animal's presence is kind of fundamentally disruptive to the educational atmosphere. Now, having said that, you know, if the service animal were to be excluded from an activity or a space in the building, that's not to say the child would be excluded. We would have to come up with alternative accommodations for that child. So, you know, this animal is not meant to be a classroom animal. It is provided there for an individual based on their disability. So, those are, dogs? I'm sorry?
Are they always dogs, or are there other?
Well, that's why I said service animal, because mostly, but it doesn't have to be.
What else could it be?
Well, I mean, I've even seen miniature horse mentioned, so. I bring this to you as in, you know, this is, we are not the first to have this policy procedure. I actually looked through 7 other counties to write this one, just to make sure we had all the pieces and parts and we were in line with everybody else across the state. So,
We don't have anybody currently using that?
We do not. I'm looking at Mary Helen. We do not have anybody currently using a service animal.
No.
I have a student with a therapy animal that comes in occasionally.
Right, but I think the student is actually coming to a specific place in the building. It's not in going to the classroom and things like that at this point.
We're going to work on a policy for therapy.
Right.
We've got some things that we're still researching.
Right. So this, I kind of brought you the highlights of this procedure policy for information tonight, and would certainly be, you know, happy to answer any questions after you have time to digest this one next month.
So what happens if there's a service dog
right.
in the classroom and some other child is allergic to it? Then what do you do?
Right.
Don't they have non-allergenic dogs?
They what?
Just ignore that.
I mean, again, that's going to be one of those things that roads that we're going to have to cross that road, because we are going to have well, I mean, you know, we're going to have to find those kinds of things out.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to come up. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next items are just procedures. No, you want to go through each one individually, or just know that those are procedures for your information? What's the pleasure of the board? Okay. Huh?
Yeah, they're just for information.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's 4 procedures, E, F, G, and H. One is with regard to live birds and animals. The other one is referrals, suspension, expulsion. The next one is promotion, retention, and acceleration. And the last one is leaves and other absences. Criminal background. If there's anything in particular you'd like to ask questions about, this would be the time to do that, because procedures are just for your information.
I can make 669 very easy for you. Nothing has changed except for we deleted number 4, and number 4 was about guide dogs, and we felt that we covered it in this new service animal. So that one's easy. That's the only change, is a deletion.
Any other questions on any of the other procedures? services expenditures.
Good evening, Dr. Couch, President McGee, and board members. Attached is the monthly revenue and expenditure reports ending in November 30th, 2017. The item of note that I want to direct you to is the comparative analysis. When you look at county appropriation, it is up compared to last year, and that is because of the 26th cycle, so November was a 3-pay month instead of a 2-pay. So that is for your review. Any questions? The next item is the proposed calendar, budget calendar. As you can see, the breakdown, would you like me to go into detail on the breakdown? Okay, the breakdown is as follows. September of 2017 is when the capital improvement plan was presented and approved by the Board of Education as well as the county commissioners. In February 2018, it is proposed that the Board of Education establishes the priorities for the upcoming school year, and the Budget Committee reviews, requests, and establishes those priorities as seen. In March 2018, the superintendent works on developing the budget for the Board of Education. In April, the preliminary operation budget recommendation will be presented to the Board of Education, as well as a special meeting will be scheduled for the purpose of providing public hearing for the recommendation of the operating budget. And in May, the final approved budget will be presented to the board for approval, as well as being presented to the county commissioners.
Now, these are just tentative guidelines. As you know, sometimes we've had to delay and take a bit longer on any one of these steps, but we felt like this, we should be receiving the information from the state sometime in January, I understand.
Right.
Maybe you have more information about that.
Our preliminary state aid revenue numbers comes in the middle of January, so they take a 5-year average as far as declining enrollment, so we'll get a better idea of where we're going to stand as far as that's concerned.
The administration recommends the approval of the proposed fiscal year 18-19 budget calendar. Looking for a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, Mr. Marcus.
The next is the second reading of the purchasing policy, DJA, and it is brought for you. Last month it was for information, and this time it's seeking for approval. And this one was purchasing authority, and it just basically added the word value to it in addition to savings and efficiencies, and then the administrator of contracts.
And does it designate you as the purchasing agent?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay. The administration recommends approval of Board of Education Policy DJA on purchasing authority. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
The next policy we bring before you is DJC, the bidding requirements. And the update here is the anything over 25,000 will be taken to the board. And then in addition to the guidelines, it's also best value for school purchases.
The administration recommends approval of Board of Education Policy DJC on the bidding requirements. Is there a motion? Make a motion. Second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The next policy is DJF, purchasing procedure. And under this update, it includes the purchasing manual, which was brought last month. It references that as a guideline for anyone who wishes to purchase. And the responsibility of the employees and the negotiating team within that purchasing manual, and then the guidelines.